The roar of jet engines echoed across Pensacola Naval Air Station as Captain Marcus Steele Richardson watched something that shouldn't have been possible. Through his aviator sunglasses, he observed an F-16 Fighting Falcon executing a textbook carrier landing approach, smooth, precise, and flawless. The problem? According to the flight manifest, there shouldn't have been anyone qualified to fly that aircraft on duty that afternoon. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happened next would change everything for a young woman who had spent the last 8 years believing her place was on the ground, not in the sky. Sarah Chen had never planned to become a legend. At 26 years old, she was known around the Naval Air Station for two things: her ability to diagnose engine problems that stumped seasoned mechanics, and her habit of staying late to ensure every aircraft under her care was mission-ready. Her colleagues in the maintenance hangar respected her technical expertise, but none of them knew about the secret she carried, or the dreams she had quietly buried years ago. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, Sarah had been the daughter of two Boeing engineers who filled their dinner conversations with talk of aerodynamics, thrust-to-weight ratios, and the poetry of flight. Her childhood bedroom walls were covered not with boy band posters, but with detailed schematics of fighter jets and commercial aircraft. While other kids played video games, Sarah built model planes and studied how wings generated lift. Her parents, David and Linda Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s with engineering degrees and boundless optimism about the American dream. They worked their way up through Boeing's ranks, contributing to the design of everything from commercial airliners to military transport aircraft. Sarah absorbed their passion for aviation like a sponge, but she also inherited something else from them: a practical mindset that prioritized stability over dreams. When high school guidance counselors asked about her future plans, Sarah's answer was always the same: aerospace engineering at the University of Washington, followed by a career at Boeing like her parents. It was a safe path, a logical progression that would honor her family's legacy while providing financial security. But life, as Sarah would learn, rarely follows the blueprints we draw for it. The summer before her senior year of high school, everything changed. David Chen was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 52. The medical bills mounted quickly, and Linda had to reduce her hours at Boeing to become his primary caregiver. The college fund that had been carefully built over 18 years suddenly became the family's lifeline for medical expenses and daily survival. Sarah watched her dreams of aerospace engineering slip away with each medical bill that arrived in their mailbox. She graduated high school with a 4.2 GPA and acceptance letters to several prestigious engineering programs, but the financial reality was undeniable. College wasn't an option, at least not immediately. That's when Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez visited her high school's career fair. He was a Navy recruiter with 20 years of service, sharp in his dress blues, and genuinely passionate about the opportunities military service could provide. Sarah found herself drawn to his booth, not because she had ever considered military service, but because the pamphlets featured images of F-A-18 Super Hornets and detailed descriptions of aviation maintenance programs. "You know," Rodriguez said, noticing her lingering interest in the aircraft specifications, "the Navy has some of the most advanced aviation maintenance training in the world. We teach you skills that translate directly to civilian aerospace careers, and we pay you to learn. Plus, there's the GI Bill for college afterward." Sarah took the pamphlets home and spread them across her bedroom floor, the same floor where she had once assembled model aircraft with dreams of designing the next generation of fighters. The path wasn't what she had envisioned, but it was a path toward aviation nonetheless. More importantly, it was a path that would provide immediate income for her family and education benefits for her future. Linda Chen cried when Sarah announced her decision to enlist. They weren't tears of disappointment, but tears of pride mixed with worry. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered, holding Sarah close. "You're finding a way to chase your dreams while taking care of your family. That's the most honorable thing anyone can do." Boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Training Center was everything Sarah expected and nothing she was prepared for. The physical demands pushed her beyond limits she didn't know she had, but it was the mental challenges that truly tested her resolve. She excelled in the technical coursework, consistently scoring in the top percentile on mechanical aptitude tests and aircraft systems examinations. Her drill instructors noticed her potential early. Chief Petty Officer Williams, a tough-as-nails veteran with 30 years of service, pulled Sarah aside during week 6 of training. "Chen," he said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in uniform, "I've seen your test scores. I've watched how you troubleshoot problems that stump other recruits. You've got something special, an intuitive understanding of how machines work. But more importantly, you've got the discipline to develop that gift." Sarah stood at attention, uncertain where the conversation was heading. "I'm recommending you for advanced aviation maintenance training," Williams continued. "It's intensive, it's demanding, and it will push you harder than anything you've experienced so far. But if you succeed, you'll be working on some of the most sophisticated aircraft in the world. Are you interested?" Sarah's response was immediate and unwavering. "Yes, Chief, absolutely." Advanced individual training at Pensacola Naval Air Station introduced Sarah to a world she had only imagined. The base was home to some of the most elite aviation units in the military, including the Blue Angels Flight Demonstration Squadron. Every day she watched F-18 Hornets streak across the Florida sky, their blue and gold paint schemes unmistakable even from miles away. Her training class of 30 sailors was diverse in background but united in purpose. There was Martinez from Los Angeles, whose father had been an Army helicopter mechanic in Vietnam. Johnson from rural Alabama, who had grown up rebuilding crop dusters with his grandfather. Williams from Detroit, whose dream was to eventually become a commercial airline mechanic. And then there was Sarah, the quiet one from Portland, who seemed to understand aircraft systems on an almost molecular level. The coursework was relentless. 12-hour days spent learning hydraulic systems, electrical circuits, engine mechanics, and avionics. Sarah thrived in the environment, often staying after hours to study technical manuals and aircraft schematics. Her instructors began to take notice. Senior Chief Anderson, the lead instructor for advanced propulsion systems, was a legend at the training command. He had maintained F-14 Tomcats during the final years of their service and had personally worked on aircraft that flew combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. His standards were impossibly high, and his approval was something few students ever earned. 3 months into the program, Anderson approached Sarah after a particularly challenging examination on turbofan engine troubleshooting. "Chen," he said, "I've been doing this for 25 years. I've trained thousands of sailors to work on military aircraft. Most of them become competent mechanics. Some become excellent technicians. But every few years, I encounter someone who has an almost supernatural ability to understand how aircraft think and feel." Sarah listened intently, unsure whether she was about to receive praise or criticism. "You diagnosed that simulated engine failure in 14 minutes, Anderson continued. "The average time for that scenario is 43 minutes. The record was 18 minutes, set by a sailor who went on to become a test pilot. You didn't just find the problem, you understood why it occurred and how to prevent it from happening again." He paused, studying Sarah's reaction. "There's something else, though. I've watched you during the flight line tours. While other students are asking about maintenance schedules and parts inventory, you're studying flight control surfaces and asking questions about aerodynamics. You're not just interested in fixing these aircraft, you're interested in flying them." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. She had tried to hide her fascination with the operational side of aviation, focusing on her assigned role as a future maintenance technician, but Anderson had seen through her professional facade. "There's nothing wrong with that curiosity," he assured her. "In fact, it makes you a better mechanic. Understanding how aircraft are supposed to perform helps you maintain them more effectively. But I want you to remember something. The best maintainers are often the ones who could have been pilots if circumstances had been different." Those words would echo in Sarah's mind for years to come, especially during the long nights when she found herself staring at aircraft manuals and flight training guides that had nothing to do with her official duties. Upon graduation from advanced training, Sarah received orders to Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach, home to several F-18 Super Hornet squadrons. She was assigned to VFA 103, the Jolly Rogers, a storied squadron with a history dating back to World War II. Their aircraft bore distinctive skull and crossbones emblems, and their pilots were known for their aggressive flying style and unwavering professionalism. Sarah's first day at Oceana was overwhelming. The flight line stretched for what seemed like miles, filled with dozens of Super Hornets in various stages of maintenance and preparation. The noise was constant, engines spooling up, hydraulic systems cycling, and the occasional sonic boom from aircraft returning from training missions. She was assigned to a maintenance crew led by Staff Sergeant Morrison, a career enlisted man with 15 years of experience and zero tolerance for mistakes. Morrison's crew was responsible for maintaining 8 F/A-18E Super Hornets, ensuring they were always ready for whatever mission came next. "Listen up, Chen," Morrison said during her first briefing. "These aircraft are worth $68 million each. More importantly, they carry pilots whose lives depend on our work. There are no acceptable mistakes in this job. Everything we do is checked, double-checked, and documented. Questions?" Sarah had no questions about the technical requirements. She understood the importance of precision and attention to detail, but she did have questions about the aircraft themselves. Questions about their capabilities, their limitations, and what it felt like to push them to their operational envelope. Those questions she kept to herself. The next 8 years of Sarah's career were defined by excellence and quiet ambition. She became Morrison's most trusted technician, eventually earning promotion to Petty Officer Second Class and taking on increased responsibilities for training newer personnel. Her expertise extended beyond basic maintenance to include advanced troubleshooting of complex avionics systems and engine performance optimization. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. But throughout those 8 years, Sarah never lost her fascination with the operational side of aviation. During her off-duty hours, she studied flight manuals, aerodynamic principles, and tactical procedures. She knew the specifications of every aircraft on the base, not just from a maintenance perspective, but from a pilot's perspective as well. Her colleagues respected her technical expertise, but they had no idea about the flight simulator software she had installed on her personal computer or the weekends she spent at a civilian flight school in Norfolk, slowly working toward her private pilot's license using her own savings. Sarah Chen was still just a maintenance crew, but she was also something more, a pilot waiting for her moment to prove that dreams deferred are not always dreams denied. The afternoon of March 15th started like any other Tuesday at Naval Air Station Pensacola. Sarah had been temporarily assigned to the base for a specialized avionics certification course, a 3-week program that would qualify her to work on the latest electronic warfare systems. The Florida sun beat down mercilessly on the tarmac as she completed her morning inspection of a training F-16C Fighting Falcon that had been experiencing intermittent radar issues. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres, the aircraft's assigned pilot, was scheduled for a routine training flight at 1,400 hours. Torres was known throughout the squadron as a demanding perfectionist who had zero patience for mechanical problems that could compromise mission effectiveness. She had flown combat missions over Syria and had recently been selected for the Navy's test pilot school at Patuxent River, a career trajectory that put her among the elite of naval aviation. Sarah had spent the better part of 2 hours tracing electrical connections and running diagnostic tests on the APG-68 radar system. The problem was elusive. A ghost in the machine that appeared and disappeared without apparent pattern or cause. Finally, she discovered a microscopic crack in a fiber optic cable that connected the radar processor to the display system. The damage was so subtle that it had escaped detection during 3 previous inspections by other technicians. "Ma'am, I found the issue," Sarah informed Torres as the pilot completed her pre-flight briefing. "Hairline fracture in the fiber optic bundle for the radar display interface. I've replaced the entire cable assembly and run a full systems check. Everything showing green across the board." Torres nodded approvingly. "What's your assessment of the cause?" "Most likely vibration fatigue from repeated high-G maneuvers," Sarah replied. "The cable routing takes it through a section of the airframe that experiences significant stress during aerobatic flight. I've rerouted it through a more protected pathway and added additional securing points to prevent future failures." "Outstanding work, Petty Officer Chen. This aircraft has been plaguing us for weeks." Torres paused, studying Sarah with curious eyes. "You know, most maintenance personnel just fix the immediate problem. You're thinking about root cause analysis and long-term solutions. That's pilot-level systems thinking." The comment struck Sarah more deeply than Torres could have known. It was validation of the way her mind naturally approached problems. not just as isolated mechanical issues, but as part of larger operational systems that needed to function flawlessly under extreme conditions. Torres climbed into the cockpit and began her startup procedures. Sarah watched from the flight line as the F-16's engine spooled to life, its familiar whine building to a powerful roar. The aircraft taxied to the active runway, received clearance from the tower, and lifted off into the cloudless Florida sky. What happened next would be talked about in squadron ready rooms for months to come. 47 minutes into what should have been a routine hour-long training flight, Torres's voice crackled over the emergency frequency. Pensacola Tower, Viper 204, declaring an emergency. I'm experiencing complete hydraulic system failure. Flight controls are severely degraded, and I'm having difficulty maintaining level flight. The tower immediately cleared all other traffic from the airspace and activated emergency response protocols. Fire trucks and ambulances raced toward the runway as Torres fought to keep her aircraft controllable. The F-16, normally one of the most responsive fighters in the world, had become a barely manageable flying machine that required constant input to prevent it from departing controlled flight. Viper 204, are you able to maintain the current altitude? The tower controller asked, his voice professionally calm despite the gravity of the situation. Negative, tower, I'm in a slow descent, rate approximately 500 feet per minute. I can probably stretch this to maybe 10 more minutes of flight time before I have to consider ejection. Quote. Sarah listened to the radio traffic from the maintenance hangar, her heart pounding as she realized the pilot whose life hung in the balance was the same woman who had praised her systems thinking just an hour earlier. She found herself studying the technical manuals for F-16 hydraulic systems, searching for any information that might help with recovery procedures. That's when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The backup hydraulic system that Torres was relying on had a known vulnerability, a pressure relief valve that could fail catastrophically if the primary system had suffered certain types of damage. If that valve failed while Torres was attempting to land, the results would be fatal. Sarah grabbed her radio and called the tower. Pensacola Tower, this is Petty Officer Chen, Maintenance Control. I need to speak with Viper 204 immediately. I have critical information about her aircraft systems. Stand by. Maintenance Control. A few seconds later, Torres's voice came through Sarah's radio. Go ahead, Maintenance Control. Ma'am, based on the symptoms you're describing, I believe your primary hydraulic failure may have created overpressure in the backup system. There's a relief valve that could fail without warning, which would leave you with no flight control authority whatsoever. You need to avoid any aggressive control inputs and maintain as steady a descent profile as possible. There was a pause before Torres responded. Roger. Maintenance Control. Can you tell me what my landing options look like? Sarah's mind raced through the technical specifications and failure scenarios she had memorized over the years. Ma'am, with backup hydraulics only, you're going to need at least 4,000 feet of runway to stop safely. Your approach speed will be higher than normal, and you'll have limited ability to correct for crosswinds or turbulence. Copy that. Tower, I need runway 06, longest available, and I need all emergency equipment standing by. What Sarah said next surprised everyone listening, including herself. Ma'am, if I may suggest, consider a carrier-style approach rather than a standard Air Force pattern. The steeper glide slope will give you better energy management with degraded controls, and the precise touchdown point will be more predictable. Torres was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke, there was a note of intrigue in her voice. Maintenance Control, how do you know about carrier landing procedures? Quote. Sarah realized she had revealed knowledge that went far beyond her official training. Ma'am, I've studied naval aviation procedures extensively. I believe it's the safest approach given your current situation. Roger that, Maintenance Control. I'm setting up for a carrier approach to runway 06. From the ground, Sarah watched as the F-16 appeared in the distance, approaching at an angle that was steeper and more controlled than a typical Air Force landing pattern. Torres was flying the approach exactly as Sarah had suggested, maintaining a steady descent rate and energy management that would maximize her chances of a successful touchdown. The landing was textbook perfect, despite the emergency conditions. Torres touched down precisely on the numbers, deployed her drag chute, and brought the aircraft to a safe stop with room to spare. Emergency crews swarmed the F-16 as Torres climbed out of the cockpit, visibly shaken but unharmed. 20 minutes later, Torres found Sarah in the maintenance hangar. Her flight suit was still damp with perspiration, and her hands showed the slight tremor that follows an adrenaline surge. "Petty Officer Chen," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Where did you learn about carrier landing procedures? That knowledge potentially saved my life today." Sarah took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I've been studying aviation procedures on my own time for years. I have my private pilot's license, and I've read extensively about military flight operations. I know it's not part of my official duties, but understanding how these aircraft are supposed to perform helps me maintain them more effectively." Torres studied Sarah with the analytical gaze of a test pilot evaluating a new system. "You diagnosed a hydraulic system failure scenario from the ground, recommended emergency procedures that aren't in any Air Force manual, and demonstrated knowledge of naval aviation that most Navy pilots don't possess. That's not maintenance-level thinking. That's pilot-level thinking." She paused, seeming to make a decision. "There's someone I think you need to meet." Captain Marcus Richardson just took command of the Blue Angels demonstration team. He's always looking for exceptional people, regardless of their current job classification. Would you be interested in having a conversation with him? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The Blue Angels represented the absolute pinnacle of naval aviation, precision flying that demanded perfection from every member of the team, whether they were pilots or support personnel. "Ma'am, I would be honored to meet Captain Richardson." "Good. I'll make some calls. But Chen?" Torres smiled for the first time since her emergency landing. "When you meet him, don't just talk about maintenance. Talk about flying. I have a feeling he's going to want to hear what you have to say." As Torres walked away, Sarah realized that her carefully constructed life as a maintenance professional had just taken an unexpected turn. The dreams she had kept hidden for 8 years were about to be exposed to someone who had the power to either crush them completely or transform them into reality. The next phase of her journey was about to begin, and there would be no going back. Captain Marcus Steele Richardson's office overlooked the Blue Angels hangar at Naval Air Station Pensacola, where 6 pristine F/A-18 Super Hornets sat in perfect formation. The walls were lined with photographs from airshows around the world, images of the team performing their signature diamond formation over the Golden Gate Bridge, the Capitol Building, and countless other iconic American landmarks. Richardson had been with the Blue Angels for 2 seasons as a pilot before taking command, and he understood better than most that the team's reputation for perfection was built on the contributions of every single person, from pilots to mechanics to logistics specialists. When Lieutenant Commander Torres called requesting a meeting for an exceptional maintenance technician with unusual qualifications, Richardson was intrigued but not entirely surprised. Throughout his 20-year naval career, he had encountered numerous enlisted personnel whose talents extended far beyond their official job descriptions. The military had a way of attracting people with diverse backgrounds and hidden capabilities, and the smart commanders were those who recognized and developed that potential. What did surprise him was Torres's insistence that this meeting was urgent and that the individual in question had demonstrated knowledge that potentially saved her life during an emergency situation. Torres was not given to exaggeration, and her reputation as a test pilot meant she evaluated people and situations with scientific precision. The knock on Richardson's office door came at exactly 0800 hours, the appointed time for the meeting. Sarah Chen entered wearing her dress blue uniform, every ribbon and insignia positioned with mathematical precision. Her bearing was confident but respectful, the posture of someone who understood military protocol but wasn't intimidated by rank or authority. "Petty Officer Chen reporting as requested, sir," she said, executing a crisp salute. Richardson returned the salute and gestured toward the chairs facing his desk. "Please, have a seat. Lieutenant Commander Torres tells me you provided some exceptional assistance during her emergency landing yesterday. I'd like to hear about that from your perspective." Sarah settled into the chair and met Richardson's gaze directly. "Sir, I was monitoring the emergency frequency when I heard Lieutenant Commander Torres report her hydraulic failure. Based on the symptoms she described, I realized there was a secondary failure mode that could have catastrophic consequences if not properly managed." "And how exactly did you know about F-16 hydraulic failure modes? That's not typically part of Super Hornet maintenance training." "Sir, I make it a point to study all aircraft systems that I might encounter during my career. Knowledge of different platforms makes me more effective at diagnosing problems and understanding how various systems interact." Sarah paused. I also recognized that her best chance for a safe landing would be to use a carrier approach rather than standard Air Force procedures. Richardson leaned forward. Explain that assessment. With degraded flight controls, she needed precise energy management and a predictable touchdown point. The carrier approach provides both steeper glide slope for better energy control and a more focused landing zone. The technique translates well to land-based operations when circumstances require it. Where did you learn about carrier landing procedures? This was the moment Sarah had been dreading and anticipating since Torres first mentioned this meeting. Her answer would either open doors or close them permanently. Sir, I hold a private pilot's license that I earned during my off-duty time. I've also completed extensive self-study of naval aviation procedures, aerodynamics, and tactical flight operations. I understand these subjects aren't part of my official duties, but they help me perform my maintenance responsibilities more effectively. Quote, Richardson was quiet for several seconds, studying Sarah with the analytical intensity that had made him one of the Navy's most respected demonstration pilots. Show me your logbook. Sarah had brought her civilian pilot logbook, hoping but not expecting that it would be relevant to the conversation. She handed it across the desk and watched as Richardson examined her flight hours, aircraft types, and instructor endorsements. Interesting, he murmured, flipping through the pages. You've got time in everything from Cessna 152s to complex aircraft. Your instructor notes are consistently excellent. This entry here, aerobatic training, that's not typical for civilian pilots. Sir, I wanted to understand high-performance flight regimes. The civilian aerobatic course helped me comprehend the stresses that military aircraft experience during tactical operations. Richardson closed the logbook and set it on his desk. Petty Officer Chen, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an equally direct answer. If circumstances were different, if you had taken a different path early in your career, would you have wanted to be a naval aviator? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah felt 8 years of carefully maintained professional boundaries dissolving. This was her moment of truth. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Flying has been my passion since childhood. The only reason I didn't pursue that path initially was family circumstances that required immediate financial support. But if I had the opportunity now, I would pursue it without hesitation. Richardson nodded slowly. Torres mentioned something else. She said you demonstrated pilot-level systems thinking during the emergency. What do you think she meant by that? Sir, I believe she was referring to my ability to see beyond the immediate mechanical problem to understand the broader operational implications. When I heard her emergency call, I wasn't just thinking about hydraulic system repairs. I was thinking about flight dynamics, energy management, and risk mitigation strategies. That's how pilots think about problems. Exactly. Richardson stood and walked to the window overlooking the flight line. The Blue Angels are more than a demonstration team. We represent the absolute pinnacle of naval aviation precision and professionalism. Every member of this organization, regardless of their specific role, must understand flight operations at a level that goes far beyond basic technical competence. He turned back to face Sarah. We're currently evaluating candidates for several positions within the organization. Some are pilot positions, others are specialized support roles that require unique combinations of technical expertise and operational understanding. Based on this conversation and Torres' recommendation, I think you might be a candidate worth considering. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Sir, what would that process involve? First, you'd need to complete a comprehensive evaluation of your technical skills, flight knowledge, and ability to perform under pressure. If you pass that phase, you'd be considered for advanced training that could lead to various opportunities within naval aviation. Richardson walked back to his desk and picked up a folder that had been sitting beside Sarah's logbook. I've taken the liberty of reviewing your service record. Your performance evaluations are outstanding. Your technical certifications are impressive, and your leadership potential ratings are consistently in the top percentile. More importantly, you've demonstrated initiative and professional development that goes well beyond the minimum requirements. He opened the folder and extracted a single sheet of paper. This is an application for the Navy's Seaman to Admiral 21 program. It's designed for exceptional enlisted personnel who show potential for commissioned officer roles. If accepted, you'd attend Officer Candidate School, followed by specialized training that could include flight school. Sarah stared at the document, hardly believing what she was seeing. The STA-21 program was legendary within the enlisted ranks, a pathway for extraordinary sailors to become officers and potentially aviators, but the selection process was notoriously competitive. Sir, I'm honored that you would consider me for such an opportunity, but I have to ask, what made you think I might be qualified? Richardson smiled for the first time during their meeting. Yesterday, you diagnosed a complex emergency situation from the ground, recommended procedures that saved a pilot's life, and demonstrated knowledge that most naval aviators don't possess. Today, you've shown me that your passion for aviation goes far beyond casual interest. You've invested years of personal time and money into developing real expertise. He leaned back in his chair. But there's something else. In 20 years of naval service, I've learned to recognize people who have what we call the right stuff. It's not just technical competence or flying ability. It's a combination of judgment, courage, intellectual curiosity, and absolute commitment to excellence. You have those qualities. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the possibilities that were suddenly opening before her. Sir, if I were to pursue this path, what would be the timeline? The next STA-21 selection board convenes in 6 weeks. If you're selected, you'd begin officer candidate school in January, followed by a flight training that could take up to 2 years. It's a long road, and there are no guarantees. But for someone with your background and demonstrated capabilities, I believe the odds of success are very good. Richardson stood, indicating that the meeting was coming to an end. I want you to take this application and think carefully about what it represents. This isn't just a career change. It's a complete transformation of your professional identity. The demands are extreme, the standards are unforgiving, and the failure rate is significant. Sarah rose and accepted the application packet. Sir, how long do I have to make this decision? 2 weeks. If you decide to proceed, I'll personally endorse your application and ensure you receive the preparation support you'll need for the selection process. As Sarah prepared to leave, Richardson had one final comment. Petty Officer Chen, yesterday you proved that exceptional people sometimes emerge from unexpected places. The Navy's strength has always been its ability to recognize and develop talent wherever it's found. I have a feeling this conversation is just the beginning of a very interesting journey. Sarah saluted and turned to leave, clutching the application packet that represented everything she had dreamed of for the past 8 years. As she walked across the base toward her quarters, she realized that her carefully planned life as a maintenance professional was about to undergo the most dramatic transformation imaginable. The dreams she had deferred were finally within reach, but claiming them would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed. The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 3 days after Sarah's meeting with Captain Richardson. She had been lying awake, staring at the ceiling of her quarters while wrestling with the most important decision of her life. The STA-21 application sat on her desk, partially completed but unsigned, representing a future that seemed simultaneously within reach and impossibly distant. Sarah, it's Mom. Linda Chen's voice carried across the country from Portland, tinged with the exhaustion that had become her constant companion over the past 8 years. I hope I'm not calling too late. I know you're 3 hours ahead. Sarah sat up in bed, immediately alert. Her mother rarely called this late unless something was wrong. Mom, is everything okay? Is Dad all right? He's fine, sweetheart. Well, as fine as he can be. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Dr. Martinez had some news today about the new experimental treatment program at OHSU. They've accepted your father as a candidate. Sarah's heart leaped. Oregon Health and Science University had been developing innovative therapies for early-onset Alzheimer's, but the programs were extremely selective and prohibitively expensive. For months, Linda had been navigating insurance appeals and medical consultations, hoping to secure a spot for David in one of their clinical trials. Mom, that's incredible news. What does the treatment involve? It's a combination of drug therapy and cognitive rehabilitation that's shown promising results in slowing disease progression. The clinical trial would cover most of the costs, but we'd still need to handle transportation, lodging for the family members who participate in the program, and various out-of-pocket expenses. Linda paused, and Sarah could hear the weight of unspoken calculations in her mother's silence. Sarah, I don't want to burden you with this, but the coordinator mentioned that family financial stability is one of their evaluation criteria. They want to ensure that participants can commit to the full 18-month program without financial stress that might compromise compliance. Sarah understood immediately. Her steady Navy paycheck and the monthly support she sent home had become a crucial factor in her father's medical care. The experimental program represented hope for slowing his cognitive decline, but it also meant her family's dependence on her financial contribution would continue indefinitely. "Mom, of course we'll make it work. Dad's treatment is the priority. How much are we talking about?" The coordinator estimated around $1,500 per month in additional expenses. "I know that's a lot, but Sarah, this might be our only chance to give your father more good years. The earlier intervention happens, the more effective these treatments tend to be." After the call ended, Sarah sat in the darkness of her quarters, feeling the weight of competing loyalties pressing down on her chest. The STA-21 program would mean giving up her current income for at least 3 years while she attended officer candidate school and flight training. Even if she received the modest stipend provided to officer candidates, it would be a fraction of her current earnings as a petty officer second class. Her family needed her financial stability, but her dreams needed her to take this unprecedented opportunity. The next morning, Sarah sought out Senior Chief Martinez, the maintenance chief who had become both a mentor and friend over the past year. Martinez was a 26-year veteran who had seen countless sailors face career-defining decisions, and Sarah trusted his judgment more than almost anyone else in her professional life. They met in the maintenance office before the start of the regular workday, sharing coffee and watching the first flights of the morning take off into the Florida sunrise. "Chief, can I ask you about something personal?" Sarah began, uncertain how much to reveal about her situation. "Of course, Chen. What's on your mind?" "If you had the chance to completely change your career path, to pursue something you'd always dreamed about but thought was impossible, would you take it, even if it meant sacrificing financial security for your family?" Martinez studied her with the perceptive gaze of someone who had counseled hundreds of sailors through life-changing decisions. "That's a hell of a question, Chen. Are we talking hypothetically, or is there something specific you're wrestling with?" Sarah took a deep breath and told him about her meeting with Captain Richardson, the STA-21 opportunity, and her family's medical situation. Martinez listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When she finished, he was quiet for several minutes, stirring his coffee and gazing out at the flight line. "You know," he finally said, "I've been in the Navy for over 2 decades, and I've seen a lot of talented people make decisions based on fear instead of potential. Fear of failure, fear of change, fear of letting other people down. Most of those people are still doing the same jobs they were doing 20 years ago, wondering what might have been." He turned to face Sarah directly. "But I've also seen people take calculated risks that transform not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. The key word there is calculated. You're not talking about running away to join the circus. You're talking about a legitimate military program with clear career progression and excellent long-term financial prospects." "But Chief, the immediate financial impact on my family could be significant. Have you actually run the numbers, or are you just assuming it's impossible?" Martinez pulled out a notepad. "Let's think about this logically. What's an officer's starting salary compared to your current pay? What kind of flight pay do naval aviators receive? What are the long-term earning prospects for a commissioned officer versus an enlisted maintenance chief?" They spent the next hour working through financial scenarios, researching officer pay scales, and calculating potential outcomes. The picture that emerged was more nuanced than Sarah had initially understood. While there would indeed be a short-term reduction in income during training, the long-term financial benefits of an officer's career were substantial. More importantly, Martinez helped her research military family support programs, educational benefits that could be transferred to family members, and medical care options that might actually improve her father's treatment prospects. "Chen," Martinez said as their conversation concluded, "I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. In my opinion, turning down this opportunity wouldn't just be a disservice to yourself, it would be a disservice to your family. You're thinking about this as a choice between supporting them financially or pursuing your dreams, but what you're really choosing between is providing temporary financial support versus building the kind of career that could provide long-term security for everyone you care about." That afternoon, Sarah called her mother back. "Mom, I need to tell you about something that's happening with my career. It's going to require some changes in our financial planning, but I think it could ultimately be better for our whole family." She explained the STA-21 opportunity, the potential impact on her immediate earnings, and the long-term prospects for an officer's career. Linda listened with the analytical mind of an engineer, asking detailed questions about timelines, financial projections, and risk factors. When Sarah finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. "Sweetheart," Linda finally said, "your father and I immigrated to this country so our children could have opportunities we never dreamed of. We worked in factories and saved every penny so you could go to college and build a better life. When circumstances forced you to defer that dream, it broke our hearts. Not because we were disappointed in your choices, but because we felt responsible for limiting your potential." Linda's voice grew stronger. "If you have a chance to become a naval aviator, to serve your country in the most elite capacity possible, then you have to take it. Your father would be devastated if he thought his illness was preventing you from achieving everything you're capable of. But Mom, the financial support you need for Dad's treatment. We'll figure it out, Sarah. Families always do. Your job isn't to sacrifice your future for our present circumstances. Your job is to become the best version of yourself possible, so that when you're in a position to help, you can do so from a place of strength and capability." That evening, Sarah sat at her desk with the STA-21 application spread before her. She picked up her pen and began filling in the remaining sections, each signature and checkbox representing a commitment to the unknown. As she completed the final page, she realized that this decision represented more than just a career change. It was a declaration that dreams deferred were not dreams abandoned, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for the people who depend on you is to become everything you're capable of being. She sealed the application in its envelope and placed it in her uniform pocket. Tomorrow she would hand it to Captain Richardson and begin the most challenging journey of her life. But tonight, for the first time in years, she felt the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're moving in the right direction, even when you can't see exactly where the path leads. The selection process for the STA-21 program was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her 8 years of military service. What began as a paper application quickly evolved into a comprehensive evaluation that tested not just her technical knowledge, but her psychological resilience, leadership potential, and ability to perform under extreme pressure. The first phase took place at Naval Air Station Pensacola, where 12 candidates from across the Navy had been assembled for a week-long assessment. Sarah found herself among an impressive group: a cryptologic technician who had taught himself 3 foreign languages, a nuclear machinist's mate who had designed safety improvements that were adopted fleet-wide, and a hospital corpsman who had earned a Bronze Star for treating wounded Marines under fire in Afghanistan. Commander Patricia Hawk Williams, the program's selection officer, addressed the candidates on their first morning. Williams was a former F-16 pilot who had flown combat missions over Iraq before transitioning to personnel development roles. Her reputation for identifying exceptional talent was legendary throughout naval aviation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Williams began, "you are here because someone in your chain of command believes you possess the potential to become commissioned officers and possibly naval aviators. Over the next 7 days, we will evaluate every aspect of your capabilities, from technical proficiency to leadership under stress. Some of you will succeed, some will not. The process is designed to be challenging because the responsibilities you're seeking to assume are among the most demanding in military service." The initial academic testing was comprehensive, but manageable for someone with Sarah's background. Mathematics, physics, aerodynamics, and navigation principles were subjects she had studied extensively during her private pilot training and self-directed education. Where some candidates struggled with complex calculations involving lift coefficients and fuel consumption rates, Sarah found herself working through problems with confidence. The psychological evaluation proved more challenging. Dr. Michael Harrison, a Navy psychologist who specialized in aviator selection, conducted individual interviews that probed deeply into personal motivation, stress management, and decision-making processes. Petty Officer Chen, Drive. Harrison said during her session, "Your technical scores are outstanding, but I'm curious about your motivation for pursuing this path. You've built a successful career in maintenance. Why risk that security for an uncertain outcome in flight training?" Sarah had anticipated this question, but answering it required her to articulate feelings she had never fully expressed. "Sir, I believe that everyone has an obligation to develop their full potential in service to something larger than themselves. For 8 years, I've contributed to naval aviation from the ground. but I know I'm capable of contributing more, at a higher level of responsibility and effectiveness. And if you fail, if you wash out of flight training and have to rebuild your career from scratch, then I'll know I tried, sir. The regret of not attempting something you're capable of achieving is far worse than the temporary setback of an honorable failure. Dr. Harrison made notes in his file. Tell me about a time when you had to make a decision that disappointed people you cared about. Sarah thought about her decision to enlist instead of attending college, the years of financial support she provided instead of pursuing her own education, and ultimately her choice to apply for this program despite her family's immediate financial needs. Sir, most of my significant decisions have involved choosing between competing loyalties, family obligations versus personal development, immediate needs versus long-term potential. I've learned that the most difficult decisions are often the most important ones, and that sometimes disappointing people in the short term is necessary to serve them better in the long term. The physical evaluation tested endurance, coordination, and spatial orientation. Sarah's years of regular fitness training and her civilian flight experience served her well during the Aviation Selection Test Battery, a series of computer-based assessments that measured hand-eye coordination, multitasking ability, and response to spatial disorientation. But it was the leadership assessment that proved most revealing. The candidates were divided into teams and presented with complex scenarios that required collaborative problem-solving under time pressure. Sarah found herself naturally assuming coordination roles, synthesizing input from team members with different expertise and developing integrated solutions to multifaceted problems. During one exercise, the teams were tasked with developing an emergency response plan for a simulated aircraft accident involving hazardous materials, while other candidates focused on specific aspects of the problem, medical response, environmental containment, or operational recovery. Sarah instinctively approached it as an integrated systems challenge that required coordination across multiple domains. Chen, observed Lieutenant Commander Kelly, the evaluation officer monitoring the exercise, you're thinking about this differently than your teammates. Explain your approach. Sir, emergency response scenarios are rarely single-discipline problems. The medical, environmental, and operational aspects are interconnected. A solution that optimizes one dimension while ignoring the others often creates secondary problems that can be worse than the original incident. Sarah outlined her team's integrated approach, showing how medical triage protocols needed to account for environmental hazards, how containment procedures affected operational recovery timelines, and how resource allocation decisions impacted all three domains simultaneously. That's systems thinking at a strategic level, Kelly noted. Where did you develop that analytical framework? Sir, 8 years of aircraft maintenance taught me that mechanical problems are often symptoms of broader systemic issues. You can't fix a hydraulic leak by just replacing a seal if the root cause is vibration from an improperly balanced engine. The same principle applies to operational problems. You have to understand the whole system to implement effective solutions. On the fourth day of evaluation, the candidates faced their most challenging test, a simulated emergency scenario conducted in a flight simulator that recreated the cockpit environment of a T-6 Texan II training aircraft. Even though none of the candidates were yet qualified pilots, they were expected to demonstrate basic aircraft control and decision-making under stress. Sarah strapped into the simulator with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her civilian flight experience had been in single-engine aircraft with conventional controls, while the T-6 was a high-performance military trainer with significantly more complex systems. The simulated scenario began routinely, basic flight maneuvers and radio communications. But 15 minutes into the session, the evaluators introduced multiple system failures, partial engine power loss, electrical system degradation, and deteriorating weather conditions that required an immediate decision about emergency landing options. Sarah's years of studying aircraft systems and emergency procedures crystallized into instinctive responses. She prioritized the engine problem, diagnosed the electrical issue as secondary, and began navigating toward the nearest suitable airfield while managing power settings to maintain safe flight parameters. Pensacola approached Trainer 47 declaring an emergency. I have partial power loss and electrical system degradation. Requesting vectors to the nearest airport with emergency services available. The controller's voice, actually an instructor playing the role, responded with vectors and altitude assignments. Sarah acknowledged the instructions while continuing to troubleshoot her aircraft systems, following memory items for emergency procedures she had studied but never actually performed. Trainer 47, what is your fuel status and souls on board? Approach. Trainer 47 has approximately 45 minutes of fuel remaining at current power settings, 1 soul on board. I can maintain my current altitude but will need priority handling for an emergency approach. As the scenario progressed, Sarah demonstrated the kind of calm proficiency under pressure that the evaluators were looking for. She managed multiple system failures, communicated effectively with air traffic control, and executed a successful emergency landing that brought her simulated aircraft to a safe stop on the runway. When the simulation ended and the evaluators debriefed her performance, Commander Williams was present to observe. "Petty Officer Chen," Williams said, "that was an impressive demonstration of crisis management. Your prioritization of tasks, communication skills, and flight management were at the level we'd expect from someone with significantly more training. How did you know to handle the electrical failure as a secondary priority?" "Ma'am, the engine problem posed an immediate flight safety risk, while the electrical degradation was primarily an equipment issue that could be managed with backup systems. In emergency situations, you have to focus on the problems that can kill you first, then work through the ones that just make your life more difficult." Williams nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need in naval aviators. The final day of evaluation concluded with individual interviews with the selection board. Sarah sat across from 3 senior officers who would determine whether her 8-year journey from maintenance crew to potential aviator would continue. "Petty Officer Chen," Commander Williams began, "you've demonstrated exceptional technical competence, leadership potential, and performance under pressure. But I have one final question. The failure rate in flight training is significant, even for well-qualified candidates. Are you prepared for the possibility that this path might not lead where you hope it will?" Sarah met her gaze directly. "Ma'am, I've spent 8 years preparing for an opportunity like this. If I'm not selected, or if I don't succeed in flight training, I'll continue serving the Navy in whatever capacity maximizes my contribution. But I'll also know that I didn't let fear prevent me from attempting something I was capable of achieving. That knowledge alone makes this journey worthwhile." 3 weeks later, the phone call came. Sarah was selected for the STA-21 program, with orders to report to Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island in January. Her transformation from maintenance crew to potential naval aviator was about to begin in earnest. But first, she had one more conversation with Captain Richardson, who had requested a final meeting before she departed Pensacola. The real test was just beginning. Officer Candidate School at Naval Station Newport proved to be a crucible unlike anything Sarah had anticipated. The 12 weeks of intensive training were designed to strip away every assumption about leadership, rebuild personal identity from the ground up, and forge the mental discipline required of naval officers. For someone who had spent 8 years as an enlisted sailor, the transition was particularly challenging. The candidate officer barracks at Nimitz Hall housed 180 future officers from diverse backgrounds, recent college graduates, enlisted personnel like Sarah, and prior service members from other branches of the military. Sarah's roommate was Jessica Park, a recent MIT aerospace engineering graduate whose theoretical knowledge of aircraft design was encyclopedic, but whose practical military experience was limited to ROTC training. The contrast between their backgrounds created an unexpected partnership. While Park struggled with military customs and procedures that were second nature to Sarah, Sarah found herself challenged by the academic rigor that Park navigated effortlessly. Their study sessions became collaborative efforts where each compensated for the other's knowledge gaps. "Chen," Park said during their 3rd week, as they prepared for a naval warfare examination, "I don't understand how you can diagnose complex mechanical problems so quickly, but you're struggling with basic orbital mechanics calculations." Sarah looked up from her textbook, frustrated by equations that seemed to shift meaning every time she thought she understood them. "It's different kinds of thinking, Park. When I'm troubleshooting an aircraft, I can see the system, touch the components, and trace the connections. These theoretical calculations feel abstract." "But that's exactly why you're going to be a better pilot than me," Park replied. "I can calculate the math perfectly, but I have no intuitive feel for how the aircraft actually behaves. You understand machines in a way that can't be taught." The physical demands of OCS were manageable for Sarah, whose years of Navy fitness training had prepared her for the endurance requirements. But the mental pressure was relentless. Drill instructor Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez was a Marine Corps veteran who had served 3 combat deployments and had zero tolerance for anything less than perfection. Candidate Officer Chen, Rodriguez bellowed during a uniform inspection that found microscopic deficiencies in Sarah's appearance. You think because you've been a sailor for 8 years that you understand what it means to be an officer? Being enlisted taught you how to follow orders. Being an officer means accepting responsibility for other people's lives. Are you ready for that responsibility? Yes, Gunnery Sergeant, Sarah responded, maintaining rigid attention while Rodriguez continued his inspection. We'll see about that, Candidate Officer. We'll see about that. The leadership practicum exercises were where Sarah began to distinguish herself from her classmates. During a simulated crisis management scenario, candidate officers were tasked with coordinating the response to a mock terrorist attack on a naval facility. Sarah found herself appointed as the operations coordinator for a team that included Park, 2 former enlisted Marines, and 3 college graduates with no prior military experience. The scenario was complex. Multiple casualties, facility damage that compromised security systems, and conflicting reports from various agencies about the extent of the threat. While other teams struggled to establish clear command structures and communication protocols, Sarah instinctively applied the systems thinking that had served her throughout her maintenance career. Park, I need you to establish a communication link with the base commander and provide regular situation updates. Martinez and Thompson, you're responsible for coordinating medical response and casualty evacuation. Williams, you'll handle security perimeter management and liaison with civilian authorities. But Sarah didn't just delegate responsibilities. She created feedback loops that ensured information flowed efficiently between different response elements. She established check-in protocols, redundant communication channels, and contingency plans for secondary failures. Lieutenant Commander Foster, the officer evaluating the exercise, observed Sarah's team with growing interest. While other groups struggled with coordination breakdowns and information silos, Sarah's team operated with the smooth efficiency of a well-rehearsed organization. Candidate Officer Chen, Foster said during the post-exercise debrief, your team achieved mission objectives in 47 minutes. The average completion time for this scenario is 73 minutes. What made the difference? Sir, I treated it as a systems integration problem rather than a collection of separate tasks. Each team member's responsibilities were designed to support the others, and the communication protocols ensured that everyone had access to the information they needed to make effective decisions. Foster nodded. That's advanced organizational thinking. Where did you develop that capability? Sir, 8 years of aircraft maintenance taught me that complex systems fail when components don't communicate effectively with each other. The same principle applies to human organizations. As OCS progressed, Sarah found herself naturally assuming leadership roles even when they weren't formally assigned. During study groups, she helped struggling classmates understand military regulations and procedures. During physical training, she provided encouragement and technique advice to those who were having difficulty meeting standards. During social events, she became the person others turned to for advice about personal problems or career concerns. The academic challenges gradually became more manageable as Sarah developed strategies for translating abstract concepts into practical applications. When studying aerodynamics, she related theoretical principles to her hands-on experience with aircraft systems. When learning about naval tactics, she connected strategic concepts to the maintenance logistics that made operations possible. Her breakthrough came during a navigation exercise that required candidate officers to plot courses for a simulated naval task force operating in contested waters. While most candidates approached it as a mathematical problem involving coordinates and bearings, Sarah visualized it as a 3-dimensional puzzle involving weather patterns, fuel consumption, threat assessment, and operational objectives. The key isn't just getting from point A to point B, she explained to her study group. It's managing all the variables that affect mission success: fuel efficiency, weather patterns, enemy threat vectors, and rendezvous timing. You have to optimize the solution across multiple constraints simultaneously. Her navigation solution earned the highest score in her class and attracted attention from the OCS academic staff. Captain Morrison, the commanding officer of OCS, requested a personal meeting during Sarah's final week of training. Candidate Officer Chen, Morrison began, your instructors tell me you've demonstrated exceptional leadership potential and innovative problem-solving capabilities. Your performance has been consistently superior across all evaluation categories. More importantly, your classmates consistently identify you as someone they would want to serve with in operational assignments. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and uncertainty. Thank you, sir. I've tried to apply the lessons I learned during my enlisted service to the challenges of becoming an officer. That integration of experience is exactly what makes prior enlisted officers valuable, Morrison continued. You understand military service from multiple perspectives, and that understanding makes you a more effective leader. But I want to discuss your next assignment. Morrison opened a folder containing Sarah's training records and future assignment options. You've been selected for primary flight training at Naval Air Station Whitingfield. Your instructors recommend you for the Tactical Jet Pipeline with the ultimate goal of F/A-18 Super Hornet qualification. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The Tactical Jet Pipeline was the most challenging path in naval aviation, leading to aircraft carrier operations and potential assignment to elite squadrons like the Blue Angels. Sir, I'm honored by that recommendation, but I have to ask, what made my instructors think I was qualified for tactical jets? Your performance during the advanced navigation exercise caught the attention of several staff members who are former naval aviators. The way you approached that problem, integrating multiple complex variables into optimized solutions, is exactly the kind of thinking required for tactical aviation operations. Morrison leaned back in his chair. But there's something else. Captain Richardson at the Blue Angels has been monitoring your progress. He specifically requested updates on your OCS performance, and he's expressed interest in your potential for future assignment to demonstration squadron operations. Sarah struggled to maintain her composure. The possibility of eventually flying with the Blue Angels had seemed like an impossible dream when she first met Richardson. Now it is being discussed as a realistic career progression. Sir, what would the timeline look like for flight training? Primary flight training is 6 months, followed by advanced training in the T-45 Goshawk for another 8 months. If you successfully complete that program, you'll transition to F/A-18 training, which takes approximately 18 months. So you're looking at roughly 3 years of intensive training before you're qualified for operational assignments. Morrison stood and extended his hand. Congratulations, Ensign Chen. You've earned this opportunity through exceptional performance and dedication. But remember, the real challenges are just beginning. Flight training will test you in ways that OCS never could. As Sarah walked out of Morrison's office wearing the gold ensign bar she had just received, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 8 months ago, she had been Petty Officer Chen, a maintenance technician whose dreams seemed permanently deferred. Now she was Ensign Chen, a newly commissioned naval officer headed for flight training with the potential to become everything she had ever aspired to be. But she also understood that receiving the opportunity was only the beginning. The next 3 years would determine whether her transformation from maintenance crew to naval aviator would be complete, or whether she would join the significant percentage of flight training candidates who didn't make it to the finish line. The phone call to her parents that evening was one of the most satisfying conversations of her life. Mom, I have some news. I graduated from officer candidate school today, and I've been selected for naval flight training. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Sarah wondered if the connection had been lost. Sarah Wonder, a mother finally whispered, Your father's going to be so proud. We're all going to be so proud. For the first time since beginning this journey, Sarah allowed herself to believe that the impossible might actually be possible. 3 years after walking into Captain Richardson's office as Petty Officer Chen, Sarah found herself back at Naval Air Station Pensacola, but everything had changed. The gold wings pinned to her chest identified her as a fully qualified F/A-18 Super Hornet pilot, and the orders in her hand directed her to report to the Blue Angels for a 2-week evaluation period that could determine the next phase of her career. The flight training pipeline had tested every aspect of her capabilities. Primary flight training in the T-6 Texan II had taught her basic aerobatics and formation flying. Advanced training in the T-45 Goshawk had introduced her to carrier operations and tactical flying. The F/A-18 transition had pushed her to master one of the most sophisticated fighter aircraft in the world. Each phase had brought its own challenges and eliminations. Of the 24 students who began her primary flight training class, only 14 had made it to advanced training. Of those 14, only 9 had been selected for tactical jets. And of those 9, only 6 had successfully completed F/A-18 training without being eliminated for performance or safety reasons. Sarah had not only survived the process, she had excelled. Her flight grades were consistently in the top 10%. Her tactical scores earned instructor commendations, and her carrier qualification had been completed on the first attempt, something achieved by less than 60% of naval aviators. But standing outside the Blue Angels hangar on a humid Florida morning, Sarah felt the same mixture of excitement and nervousness that had characterized every major transition in her military career. The Blue Angels represented the absolute pinnacle of naval aviation precision, and she was about to be evaluated by pilots whose standards were legendary throughout the aviation community. Commander Tango Rodriguez, the current Blue Angels commanding officer, greeted Sarah personally. Richardson had completed his tour and moved on to command of an operational fighter squadron, but he had left detailed notes about Sarah's potential and his recommendation for her evaluation. "Lieutenant Chen," Rodriguez said, "Captain Richardson spoke very highly of your capabilities and your journey to this point, but I want you to understand that your background and previous performance, while impressive, are just entry tickets to this conversation. The next 2 weeks will determine whether you have what it takes to represent naval aviation at the highest level." The Blue Angels evaluation process was unlike anything Sarah had experienced, even during the intensive selection phases of her earlier training. Every flight was scrutinized for precision, every briefing was analyzed for attention to detail, and every interaction was observed for the professionalism and teamwork that defined the organization. Her first flight was in the Blue Angels 2-seat F/A-18F, with Major Spike Thompson, the team's narrator and pilot of aircraft number 7, in the front seat. Thompson was a Marine Corps exchange pilot whose job included evaluating potential new team members and ensuring they could meet the exacting standards required for demonstration flying. "Chen," Thompson said during their pre-flight briefing, "we're going to run through some basic formation maneuvers, but I want you to understand that basic for the Blue Angels is advanced for most operational squadrons. Our standard separation during formation flight is 18 inches. Our altitude tolerance during maneuvers is plus or minus 10 feet. Our timing precision is measured in tenths of seconds." The flight was a revelation. Sarah had performed formation flying throughout her training, but the Blue Angels operated at a level of precision that seemed to defy the physical limitations of human reaction time and aircraft capability. During a 4-plane diamond formation, the spacing between aircraft was so close that she could clearly see the expressions on the other pilots' faces. "Your aircraft control is excellent," Thompson observed over the intercom as they completed a series of formation loops and rolls. "But I want you to think about something. Out here, we're not just flying aircraft, we're creating art. Every maneuver needs to be not just technically perfect, but visually beautiful. The public doesn't just want to see precision, they want to see poetry." After landing, Sarah was debriefed by the entire Blue Angels pilot team. 6 officers who represented the best naval aviators of their generation analyzed every aspect of her flight performance, from stick and rudder skills to spatial awareness and formation discipline. "Lieutenant Chen," said Lieutenant Commander Blade Harrison, the team's lead solo pilot, "your technical flying is outstanding, but I want to understand your motivation for being here. Why do you want to fly with the Blue Angels?" Sarah had prepared for this question, but answering it required her to articulate something that went beyond career advancement or personal achievement. "Sir, 8 years ago I was a maintenance technician who dreamed of flying but thought it was impossible. That dream became reality, because people in this organization recognized potential, where others saw only current circumstances. I want to be part of an organization that inspires people to pursue possibilities they didn't know existed." The pilots exchanged glances that Sarah couldn't interpret. "There's something else," she continued. "I've spent my entire naval career working on these aircraft from the ground up. I understand them as mechanical systems, but I also understand what they represent: the pinnacle of American aviation technology and the dedication of thousands of people who maintain, support, and operate them. Flying with the Blue Angels would let me represent not just naval aviation, but everyone who makes naval aviation possible." Commander Rodriguez leaned forward. "That's an interesting perspective. Tell me more about that." "Sir, every Blue Angels demonstration is supported by dozens of maintainers, logistics specialists, and support personnel who work incredibly hard to ensure mission success. When I was a maintenance technician, I took enormous pride in knowing that my work contributed to flight operations. Now, as a pilot, I want to represent excellence in a way that honors their contribution and inspires the next generation of people who will serve in all capacities. The second week of evaluation included increasingly complex formation flying, solo aerobatic sequences, and detailed briefings on Blue Angel's procedures and protocols. Sarah found herself adapting quickly to the precise timing and spacing requirements. But she also discovered that the mental demands were as challenging as the physical ones. During a particularly challenging formation sequence involving a six-plane delta with rapid altitude and heading changes, Sarah experienced what pilots call task saturation, the point where the information processing requirements exceed human cognitive capacity. For a moment, she felt herself falling behind the formation timing and struggling to maintain proper position. Instead of forcing the issue or making aggressive control inputs that could compromise safety, Sarah made a split-second decision to call for a formation rejoin, essentially acknowledging that she needed to reset her position rather than risk degrading the overall formation integrity. "Blue Angels, this is 7, requesting rejoin for spacing adjustment," she transmitted calmly. The formation smoothly accommodated her request, and she rejoined in the proper position within seconds. After landing, she expected criticism for the radio call that acknowledged her difficulty keeping up. Instead, Commander Rodriguez approached her with an expression of approval. "Lieutenant Chen, that radio call you made during the Delta formation, that demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and prioritization we need in this organization. You recognized when you were approaching your limits, communicated clearly, and took corrective action that maintained safety and formation integrity. That's maturity and professionalism." On the final day of her evaluation, Sarah was called to Commander Rodriguez's office for her final interview. The walls were covered with photographs from air shows around the world, but her attention was drawn to a framed image of the Blue Angels flying in formation over the USS Carl Vinson, the same aircraft carrier where she had qualified for carrier operations just 6 months earlier. "Lieutenant Shen," Rodriguez began, "your evaluation period has been outstanding in every measurable category. Your flying skills are exceptional, your professionalism is exemplary, and your attitude represents the values we want associated with this organization." Sarah felt her heart racing, but she maintained her composure. "More importantly," Rodriguez continued, "you've demonstrated something that can't be taught, the ability to inspire confidence in the people around you. The maintainers who worked on your aircraft this week consistently commented on your technical knowledge and your respect for their expertise. The pilots who flew with you noted your ability to maintain formation discipline while contributing to overall team effectiveness." He opened a folder on his desk and extracted a single sheet of paper. "I'm pleased to offer you an assignment to the United States Navy Blue Angels Demonstration Squadron as pilot of aircraft number 5, left wing position. Your reporting date is September 1st, which gives you 6 weeks to complete transition training and begin integration with the team for next season's demonstration schedule." Sarah struggled to find words adequate to express what she was feeling. The journey from maintenance crew to Blue Angels pilot seemed surreal, but the official orders in Rodriguez's hands made it undeniably real. "Sir, I am deeply honored to accept this assignment. I won't let you down." "I know you won't, Lieutenant, but I want you to remember something. You're not just representing yourself, or even just the Blue Angels. You're representing everyone who has ever been told their dreams were impossible because of their current circumstances. That's a significant responsibility, but it's also an incredible opportunity." 6 months later, Sarah found herself in the cockpit of Blue Angels aircraft number 5, flying in perfect formation 18 inches from the lead aircraft as they approached for a demonstration over her hometown of Portland, Oregon. In the crowd below, she knew her parents were watching their daughter achieve something that had seemed impossible just 4 years earlier. As the formation rolled inverted over the Columbia River, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From maintenance hangar to Blue Angel's cockpit, from deferred dreams to achieve reality, her story has become proof that potential can emerge from the most unexpected places. But more than personal achievement, her presence in that cockpit represented something larger, validation that excellence can be found anywhere, that dreams deferred are not dreams denied, and that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simple decision to believe that impossible things might actually be possible. The maintenance crew, who had once been just maintenance crew, was now writing poetry in the sky, inspiring the next generation to reach for their own impossible dreams. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.